Thank you all for taking the time to review this video and congratulations on your award. The purpose of making this video is to share helpful information about completing your Round 9 Facility Revitalization Grant. First Children's Finance mission is to grow the supply and business sustainability of excellent childcare. Our intention in sharing this information is to support the mission and to facilitate the successful completion of your grant award, which we hope will have a lasting positive impact with your childcare program. As was noted in the guidelines published for this modified grant round, funding for this grant was provided through a contract with the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, formerly the Minnesota Department of Human Services. In this session, we will cover some of the most commonly asked questions reflecting on the established guidelines for this program and addressing areas that have seemed to cause problems for others during past grant rounds. We would especially like to help you avoid an invoice for repayment of part or all of your grant. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to start with introductions. My name is Gina Porter, and I'm a Senior Grants Specialist. With me here today is Diana Hoffman, Grants Specialist, and Carrie Barnstubel, Grants Specialist. Also shown on this slide is Pam Chapman, our Minnesota Grants Team Manager. The slide shows our team contact information. We can be reached at grants@firstchildrensfinance.org and by calling 612-473-6020. Calls are answered from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, and other times as we are available. Interpreter services are also available by request. We can add an interpreter to a call if you identify the need when you're calling, or we can set an appointment to call with an interpreter at another time. We can also be reached by sending a message through the grant portal submittable using the Messages tab. Please note that all of our communications are sent by email to the address that you use to set up your submittable account. Please make sure that you monitor that email address regularly. If you need to change that email address, reach out to us and we can advise you on how to do that in Submittable. For security reasons, we cannot change your email address, but we can help you to know how to do that. Through the past 8 facility revitalization grant rounds, the list on this slide shows the areas for which we have fielded the most questions. These are the areas that we'll be focusing on and relative to successful completion of your grant award, no matter your provider type. So let's get into it and look at the information about the first area, award payments. Payment of 90% of your grant was processed just recently, so most of you that provided information for direct deposit to your bank account should have received the payment by now. Please check your bank account, and if you have not received payment by the end of January, please contact the grants team to check the status of the payment. If you are receiving a check, it should arrive by the end of January. The remaining 10% is held until final reports are completed, received, and reconciled with actual costs. The payment of 90% upfront is different from other programs, resulting in a certain level of scrutiny of expense spending. And this program is publicly funded by the state of Minnesota, which puts the program in a bit of a fishbowl regarding auditing and oversight. As it should be, and consistent with other publicly funded programs, this program is subject to auditing requirements, and that means that timely and accurate reporting are essential to the program's success. So in summary, only actual or final costs can be included in grant expenses. If your final receipts are less than the 90% you received up front, you will receive an invoice for return of underspent funds. We'll talk more about this later and what is needed for receipt documentation in upcoming slides. Next, we will look at some questions about changes that could happen with your planned purchases or projects. One change that could happen is that the cost of your project might increase. If the increased costs are affecting your ability to purchase within the grant award amount, you might be able to scale the project back or decrease the quantity of awarded items you purchase. In this new year, there has been some speculation that certain items may incur increases depending on where items are manufactured. So we do encourage you to make purchases as soon as possible to avoid possible cost increases. What if the project is underspent or it costs less than estimated? It's important to know that you should follow what was allowed in the award letter. It is not allowed to purchase items that were not approved. If approved items are on sale, it is possible to increase the quantity of awarded items, but it's very important that you contact the grants team before deviating from what was actually awarded. For instance, if you were approved for a children's table and 4 chairs and the set you want is on sale now, you may be able to purchase an additional chair or two with the grant savings. If you experience savings in one area, but prices have increased for another approved item in your grant award, you can direct savings to the items that have increased in price. Again, it's important to contact the grants team to discuss this. Any changes to the grant that might be acceptable must be approved in writing from the grants team prior to the change being made. If you do have funds remaining that cannot be spent on approved awarded items or uses, we will invoice to recover those underspent funds. It is not allowed to spend the grant funds on unrelated items. Another question is, can I change the item I intended to purchase to something else? Awarded items can be changed to other like items, say a different children's table and chair set or a different refrigerator model. The item might be slightly different, but it serves the same primary purpose. However, if the change involves a different purpose, it would be a modification which generally is not allowed. For example, if you were awarded a children's table and chair set, and now instead you want to purchase a sensory water play table, and that cannot be approved because sensory water play tables are considered programmatic items and are ineligible with this grant program. If you have questions about a potential change or modification, please contact the grants team to discuss. Any modification must be approved in writing prior to any purchase. Modifications are not guaranteed. And in fact, if the proposal to change to something different than what you were awarded, those requests are generally not approved. Another question is, can I change the contractor or laborer for my project? If your grant requires paid labor, the contractor or laborer can be changed, but please note that as stated before, you will be invoiced for any amount remaining that is less than the grant award. We've had a few grantees in prior rounds do the work themselves, thinking that they could keep the cost savings by paying for the labor, by not paying for the labor. That is not the case. There really is no benefit to finding a lower cost contractor as any unspent or underspent funds are required to be returned to First Children's Finance. It is also important for you to know that we do verify with vendors work completion and payment once we receive your final report. We also need to be able to find the person or company you hire to verify that they do the type of work that you need to be done for a living. Even people who do work on the side usually have a Facebook page or some type of online presence, or at least a professionally printed business card with multiple contact methods, such as a phone and an email. In a past grant round, a grantee hired an individual who wanted to be paid in cash only. They would not allow a photo of them completing the work to be taken, and they would not provide a phone number. The grantee paid them in cash and ended up paying that portion of the grant back because we were not able to verify the work or the payment. Please do not pay in cash. Paying with a check, cashier's check, or a credit card provides documentation that can meet the reporting requirements. We can look at the next slide to review some guidelines about paid labor. And it shows some helpful information about choosing a contractor. With other grant rounds, we've regularly fielded questions about whether contractors or laborers must be licensed. Any installation or assembly work covered with grant funding must be performed by a professional following applicable state and local laws and regulations regarding registration and licensure. That being said, the person doing the work does not have to be licensed unless licensing is required by law for that particular type of work. Your local municipality may have additional requirements, but you can check the website shown here to see if the state of Minnesota requires a license for the type of work you need. The requirement that may be most applicable is that the state requires a license when you hire one company or one individual to provide work in more than one special skill, such as plumbing, electrical, or construction, such as in an indoor renovation. Another important note, it is okay to do the labor, installation, or assembly yourself. Grant funding cannot be used to pay yourself, however. It is also not allowed to use grant funding to pay an employee of yours or a relative, friend, or a family member that lives with you or receives financial support from you, such as an adult child. If, however, you want to utilize a company that is owned by a relative of yours, please contact us to discuss this. If the relative is not an immediate family member living in your household and owns a business that does this type of work that you need done, it might be allowable. In such a case, award funds can be used to pay the company, not the person directly. And it would be preferred that the person does not do the actual work, that an employee or employees of that company or service do the actual work. Now let's take a look at how to complete the final report. The first question almost always is, where is the final report and how do I find it? The final report has already been added to your submittable account. The report is submitted through the online portal Submittable. To do this, just like when you applied for the grant, you can use a computer, tablet, or smartphone. Your login credentials will be required. In a moment, we'll share screenshots and explain how to find the final report. But before we do that, we're also often asked, is there help available to complete the final report? Yes, there is help available. We're happy to assist you, and we can set up a time to connect and we can guide you through the process. There's also a final report tutorial that can be viewed, and the link is shown here on the slide. So let's take a look at how you find the report. The screenshots here are showing the progression of screens you might see from a phone when you log into your account and navigate to the final report. The first screenshot shows what you'll see once you're logged into Submittable. And at this screen, you'll click on what's shown in the middle, View Form, View Submission. Next, you'll see a screen that shows a lineup of tabs in the middle titled Activity, Messages, Forms, Note, Award, and Payments. This is where you'll click on Forms. The third screenshot shows once you've clicked on Forms, you'll see the words Additional Forms, and the final report is shown below that. And in a blue box, you'll click on the words or the word Open. Once you open that, you are in the final report. You can begin to answer questions and complete the report. There are a couple areas where you can upload photos and receipts. And we want you to know that if you accidentally upload a photo where there should be a receipt or vice versa, please don't worry about that. As long as we can see and open the files, we'll be able to figure it out. When you're working on your final report, you can save your work by clicking on Save or Save Draft. And then when you have everything entered and you're ready to send it to us, just click on submit and it'll be sent to the grants team. As a reminder, the final report with receipts and photos for this round is due April 30th, 2025. If you run into challenges in completing or submitting your report, please contact the grants team. To help prepare you for the final report questions, Diana now will share the next slides to give a brief overview.
Thank you, Gina. So compared to the application, the final report is a brief form and it should be easier to complete. As a quick overview of what to expect, this slide shows the questions that are included in the final report. There's also some survey questions that were added to this report. We encourage you to share feedback with us that can help us improve our grant programs and processes. And your comments may also help to support our program with knowledge of the impact this type of program has made to your business operations and your ability to provide care to children and families. The next two slides provide a couple of examples for receipts and paid invoices to help show the type of documentation that is required. So this slide shows a Home Depot receipt example showing the date of order or purchase, items purchased with model SKU number and brief description, price paid, sales tax, method of payment, and total paid. Note that warranties and service plans are not eligible, but delivery fees and sales tax may be included in grant expenses. The receipt clearly shows that the item was paid for in full with the documentation of payment method. This paid invoice example highlights some of the required information. The date of the contract is shown at the top right-hand side, and then the payments are shown in the middle of the document on the left-hand side. In this case, it shows that there was a down payment made at the time of the contract agreement. It shows that the down payment was made with a credit card. Now for this example, another document would be required and was provided to us with the reporting, showing the final payment of the remaining balance. That document showed the date of the final payment, the amount of the final payment, which matches what is stated here, and then the method of payment, credit card, for that final payment. The final documentation showed balance due equals 0, which is what we are looking for in this type of scenario. Now that you have seen some examples, let's review what is required for receipts or proof of payment. This slide shows a summary of the expense documentation requirements. Receipts must demonstrate that the project has been paid in full and must be itemized. For example, an Amazon screenshot showing the total cost of an order is not acceptable. Providers must download the invoice from their Amazon account once the order is complete. Receipts and paid invoices from a contractor must include the name of the vendor or business, address, and phone number. The entire receipt and/or document must be submitted. Photos of partial receipts will not be accepted. It is best that the receipt is itemized, meaning detail about the work completed is provided on the receipt. Receipts or statements must show the date of all payments made, including any down payments. Copies showing each payment will need to be uploaded and included in the reporting. If your contractor provides a paid receipt that shows a down payment, but the date of the down payment is not provided, we will need to see copies of the front and back of your canceled check or copy of your credit card statement showing payment to that vendor. Receipts should only include items that were approved in the award. For instance, if you are purchasing a storage cabinet, cleaning supplies, and work gloves from a hardware store, please purchase the cleaning supplies and work gloves separately so that your grant receipt reflects the storage cabinet purchase only. If you submit a receipt that includes items unrelated to this grant award, you must clearly identify grant-funded items. Note that including ineligible items may result in sales tax not being included in the calculated expenses during the reconciliation process. It cannot be overstated, we strongly recommend that you do not pay in cash. Unless it is a store-generated receipt, it is very difficult to provide adequate documentation for cash payments. The next slide provides some examples of how the actual costs are reconciled. Once the final report is completed and submitted, the grants team will work to reconcile the report, which is done in the order in which reports are received. Report reconciliation process may take up to 60 days. During the reconciliation process, grant staff may reach out to request additional information or documentation. Please watch the email account listed in your submittable profile. As mentioned before, grants team staff may reach out to vendors or contractors listed in expense documentation to verify information. Note that unused grant funds may not be redirected to any item or service not approved in the grant award or a written grant modification. Reimbursement of up to the final 10% of the grant award will not be made until the final report is received and reconciled, with receipts that show the items and/or services purchased are paid in full up to the grant award, with photo documentation showing completion. The reason for the 10% being held back and paid as a reimbursement is to allow for the possibility of changes in actual costs, changes from what was estimated when you applied. At the time of purchase, or when you are making the full payment, items or projects may be subject to sales or discounts that were not expected when you applied. By holding back the final 10%, this allows the final or actual costs to be reconciled and the appropriate amount of grant funding to be applied to the distribution of funds. To better illustrate this 90%, 10% payment process, we have 3 examples here showing the possible outcomes. As a result of the final report reconciliation process that we will complete once we receive your final report. As you can see here, the grant award is for flooring and appliances equaling $10,000. In this case, appliances were approved at 100% because they are dedicated to only childcare space and use. 90% of the payment was already distributed at $9,000. The remaining funds are up to 10%, up to $1,000. In the first example, the final costs presented and approved with the final report are over the estimated expenses awarded. The grantee is due the full remaining 10% of the grant award funds, $1,000. In the second example, with total receipts of $9,250, there must have been some savings with either the flooring project or with the appliances because the actual cost came in a bit under the original requested amount. So in this case, the actual amount of $250 over the $9,000 already received will be reimbursed. Because actual costs were less, the full 10% will not be reimbursed. And in the third example, the awardee experienced deeper savings or discount with all of the items, as total receipts are less than the $9,000 already received. Therefore, the difference between the total receipts of $8,250 and the $9,000 already received has to be returned, which is $750. In this case, email notification would go out to the grantee to let them know the results of the final report reconciliation, and then an invoice will be generated for a portion of the funds to be recovered. Invoices are emailed, and payments can be made online using a secure link in invoice, or a check can be sent to the FCF office. Once payment is received and cleared, another notification will be sent to the grantee to provide a status update. If this happens and you have any questions about underspent funds or the result of the final report reconciliation, please contact the grants team as soon as you are able so that we can hear your questions or concerns and work through any issues. Next, we will have Carrie, who will talk about the deadline for completion.
Thank you, Diana. Again, final reports are due by April 30th, requiring paid in full receipts and photos showing your projects completed with purchases unpacked out of the box and ready for use in your childcare program. What happens if items are out of stock or need to be back ordered, or your project has been delayed? As we're early in this process right now, ideally before you make a deposit with a contractor or place an order, it's recommended that you verify with the contractor that the project can be completed before the deadline, or verify that your item will be delivered on time. If it's getting close to April and you know that your project is on back order or your project has been delayed, It's time to connect with us, the grants team. Because of the limited ability to approve extensions in this round, you may need to cancel that order or find another vendor or consider another contractor. Can I get an extension? A short extension might be possible for extenuating circumstances. Extensions are not guaranteed and will be very time limited. Next, we'll look at a summary of the agreement terms to help ensure further understanding. This slide shows a step-by-step overview of the grant agreement terms. By agreeing to the terms of this grant award, you've agreed to spend the awarded grant funds only as approved. You've agreed to submit a final report. The final report reconciliation will determine the results for a reimbursement payment up to the remaining 10% of the grant or an invoice. You've agreed to return funds to First Children's Finance if the grant is underspent or items or project expenses are not fully approved with the reconciliation of the final report. We want to highlight the last agreement box. You have agreed to stay in business, continuously providing care to children other than your own for 2 years from the date that your agreement was submitted and confirmed by SCF. Business closure has unfortunately been the most common reason for significant invoices for previous grantees. If you know that you'll be closing your business in under 2 years, please return your grant funds now. We regularly monitor a license during the 2-year period to verify active service and good standing, and you will be invoiced for a prorated return of grant funds if your business closes before the end of the 2-year period. Please contact the grants team if there are any changes to your license in this 2-year period, such as a relocation or a change in license status, so it can be documented in your award record. Because we do monitor licenses, if there is a change and there is no documentation, it may appear to us that the business has closed, which in turn would prompt invoicing for return of funds. Your grant will be closed upon a successful 2-year license check. A note about temporary closure. If your business will be closed for more than a couple of weeks, for example, for an unexpected illness or for a planned surgery, please let the grants team know as soon as you are able. Typically, and depending on circumstances, the amount of time that the child care service is not continuous can be added to the end of the term. By adding time to the 2-year term, funds do not have to be recovered. Note that this would require review and written approval. The following slide is an important overview of the potential repercussions if grant agreement terms are not met. We shared this slide and information not to scare you, but to inform you. We want you to be successful in managing your grant award, and we don't want you to be surprised by the non-compliance process and the unexpected event that the terms of the grant award are not met. Non-compliance may result in a discontinuation of future payments, including the 10% withheld for reimbursement for this grant, recoupment of payments already made, including some or all of the 90% grant upfront, and ineligibility for other FCF grant and loan programs. We are obligated to report noncompliance to the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families for additional action related to the funds and the provider license under Minnesota statutes. Please note that DCYF may also refer the case to another agency, such as the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and/or the Minnesota Department of Revenue. Life sometimes has unfortunate and unforeseen changes. We encourage you to connect with us to problem solve. We want to work with you to avoid noncompliance status. We would very much prefer not to invoice anyone for unused funds, and especially for noncompliance. Our hope is that the funds you've been awarded are used for your child care programs to the fullest extent allowed within the guidelines of this program, and that the funds stay in the communities that you serve. With that, we want to thank you for your time and attention. For any questions, again, please reach out to the grant team. Thank you.